This video is audio only friendly, so if you're operating an excavator, please keep your eyes on your surroundings and not on your screen. Okay, thanks. Let's dive in. Is it possible to find Divinity in Minecraft, let alone a Minecraft server that is toxic and a complete hellish wasteland? Well, I guess for me it was, and whether you believe in anything like that or not, this is, in essence, my story of letting go. Well, you may be wondering how I got here. I sort of wondered the same thing. At around the time I started playing Anarchy Minecraft, my relationship with a man I met a couple of years prior, not a romantic one, just a regular friendship type relationship. Anyway, that relationship was starting to take root in my life, I suppose, and at the same time I was also beginning to play Minecraft Anarchy servers. And before I know it, well, I guess about 10 years later, I find myself with a completely different life than I had expected for myself. I would say for the better, although right now and in the past, a lot more challenging, but challenge is good. And yeah, 10 years later, I am thinking thoughts that just 10 years ago from now, that I would just assume is crazy and I have fully gone off the rails. Which may be true, but, I'm an atheist. I always have been and always will be. I mean, I was baptized in the Catholic Church and did my little performances, but I never believed. And I still don't. So what am I perceiving then? And can it be considered real? Given my schizophrenia diagnosis, I think in a worst case scenario, I am imagining it through a combination of hallucinations and delusions. And so if my perception of this divine presence is a combination of hallucination and delusions, then, well, what is reality? Reality, at the most basic level, I suppose, is something that exists, and an atheist doesn't believe God exists. And for me, God in the description told by the Bible, the Quran, Sanskrit writings, and whatever else have you, I don't think that God exists, because that's not what I perceived. And what I perceived, certainly it must be some kind of divine presence, but not in the ways that these scriptures describe, because these scriptures are so forthright in the definitions and the ways in which this entity is and wants you to be. And that's not really what my experience has been. My experience has been more that, I don't know. I don't see God as this all-powerful man in the sky. I see it as this heavily integrated part of my body that has taken me a long time to sense and communicate with. Communicate being a pretty rough word, just like all words are, to define what that means, but just some sort of guiding, almost parental figure that I can tap into and can draw energy from. Even energy is just kind of a floofy word, you know, like saying God makes me cringe because it has all these religious connotations, and energy makes me cringe because it has all these connotations with like hippies and blah blah blah. To me, the energy is more just types of things that could be considered useful. One of them being love, or one of them being motivation, ambition, and also a sense of confidence or safety in oneself, and perhaps even things like grief and anger, and for me, rage, which I guess is sort of fear becomes anger, becomes an unhinged expression of anger, which is rage. So that's kind of the key or core theme around this exploration. Was my rage was kind of like this wild bear that someone gave me, and I had to just kind of live my life while trying to make sure that this bear doesn't kill anyone. And so that's what I did for pretty much my entire life, the first 35 years of my life, until just a couple of days ago. And so what happened in the last couple of days? That I was finally able to tame this bear, or cut it off from my life, kill it. Well, over time I've just been trying to improve myself, and my friend Rob sort of put me on that trajectory, starting with figuring out my mental health, not from a pharmaceutical perspective or even like a thinking perspective, just changing what I eat. And from there it evolved to exercising more, lifting weights. And from there it led to having a sense of purpose, which was to go to college and finish my classes and come out the other end with something. And that eventually led to starting a business, and then another one, and then another one. And then the third one did extremely well. And it didn't work for me. So I scaled back, and over the last 9 months, I've just been sort of figuring things out, and all that while, I've obviously been playing Minecraft and working on enderbook.com, and sort of in the process of figuring out where I exist, moving past my business, how I exist. I felt like I definitely wanted to do Enderbook, but it would never make the money in the time that I would need it to. But at the same time, I'd sort of just been continuing to figure out letting go of all these things that I'm trying to control that I really have no place trying to control. And eventually I don't know, I just started to have more conversations with people about this connection to our inner consciousness, divinity maybe. Doesn't matter if it's God or just part of your nervous system. It does exist, and you can perceive it, you can feel it, and you can utilize it to have it make you do the things that are hard. One of the things that the Navy SEALs did when they were training, this is hearsay, I don't know if it's true, but I heard it from someone that when Navy SEALs are doing their training and something is like really hard and they really got to push themselves to the limit, they can actually break the threshold of that limit to even further degrees if they utilize love, like, you know, whether it be, you know, I gotta live for my kids or whatever. If they utilize love, they can push themselves even harder. And so that's just an example, I guess, of utilizing. For me, I've been having this really bad problem where I'm like picking my scalp, and that's definitely stress related. And but at the same time, picking can get to like build into more picking. And so I've basically just been using this energy or whatever to basically just catch myself in the moment and just stop myself. And in the past, I've tried to stop myself, and it never worked. But doing it this way, certainly I continue to do it because, you know, I haven't solved the root cause, but I am at least doing it less. And the less I do it, the less damage that's done to my scalp, which means that there's less things for me to pick, which means I just pick less overall. And yeah, so that's another sort of like very basic example of how I use it. Obviously for, you know, kind of an embarrassing thing that I, you know, don't really like to talk about, but anyway. And the reason I've been able to like find this for myself is kind of a combination of conversations with my friend Rob. He's done his own sort of explorations. I've had conversations with other people over time, across all walks of life. Rob took more of like a Hindu approach, and he was very scientific about it, which is kind of what opened my mind up to it in the first place, because he was always skeptical, and even when he told some of his stories, he's admitting how insane he sounds. And for me, you know, I like the skepticism and I like the stories just because it sounded kind of fantastical, but, you know, I didn't really attach myself to it. It's just like, oh, this is a fun thing to listen to, you know, a fun thing to talk about to people who know about this stuff, and I just left it at that. But I did do the odd experimentation, just to see if I could feel it. And I started to a little bit, but, you know, that could just be confirmation bias or whatever else. But yeah, over the last few months, I've began to talk to more people who experience this, and again, all walks of life, whether they be you know, devout Christians, psychedelics users, yeah, Hindus, you know, Muslims. They all kind of have their own approach. Oh, and Kundalini yoga is another one. Yeah. Anyway, they all have their own approach, and I've seen the most effective is obviously psychedelics. You just ingest something and you're good to go. Kundalini yoga is probably a more natural way, but it's a pretty heavy-hitting blunt instrument, kind of like psychedelics are. Dangerous. Both are quite dangerous. And without proper guidance, of course. And I've never met a Buddhist, but I know Buddhist is kind of like the Kundalini Yoga way of doing it, but like way more measured, way slower, way more careful. So a more precise instrument compared to the blunt tool of Kundalini Yoga. And then even slower, and probably even better for a person as a whole, is the 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous. I've met a few people who have had a great degree of success finding this divinity through that program. And what's interesting is they weren't really ever trying to find it. They were just trying to stop drinking because it was ruining their lives. And that leads me to the other effective thing that I found, which is through the conversations with others, is wanting to die. If you want to die, your connection is much stronger, because if you want to die, you've kind of let go of everything. And so that's another effective tool for finding this connection. And then sort of at the F tier of finding this connection is pretty much any and all of the religions. I think anyone who can find it through these religions are probably lucky, or just have a really strong intuitive sense, and can sort of use the doctrine to make it work for them, which to me kind of implies a degree of cleverness and intelligence. And so I think that's why you'll find that even the most intelligent people that you find, if you're an atheist, you might be surprised to learn that they are religious in some way or another. And to me, when I find out a really smart person who I would think has some sense in them and is atheist, is religious, I used to be surprised, but I'm not surprised anymore. So for me, I didn't really take any of those approaches. I just sort of explored it for myself. But I did I listened to all their stories. That was kind of my approach. I listened to everyone who had their own perspective or their own discovery or ways of connecting. I just listened to them, and probably I just kind of cobbled it all together. And so all of that sort of reached this climactic point of one night in late December. My partner was going to bed, and I'm a bit of a night owl, but I lie with her as she's drifting off to sleep, and then I go back to my work or whatever. But one night she invited me to do that, and so I joined her in bed, and she was just on her phone doing whatever, and I was just laying there tinkering with this sort of exploration of divinity or whatever. And I've been doing tinkering on and off for at least a few years, and I was just doing it again, I just was tinkering, laying there, and eventually it sort of led to this, like, I almost want to say hallucination or a dream, or like just a really vivid dream. And I was in Minecraft Anarchy spawn on Constantiam.net, and I was just kind of sort of on the outer rim of it, within 2,000 blocks, and it was just really quite beautiful, and I was kind of like moving along, and as I was moving, the walls started to become kind of prismatic, with like multicolored glass, and It was just kind of like this beautiful artistic moment, and as I'm like just in full enjoyment and fully just embracing myself as I am in that moment, I just sort of get lifted into the air, and it was kind of scary, I guess, and in that moment, I got scared, and I almost wanted to give in to the fear. But then I kind of got the sense that like, oh, this is kind of that tipping point moment where like someone who is doing Kundalini yoga or, you know, some sort of spiritual practice, the fear is what sort of stops it. And I was like, okay, well, you know, I decided not to give into it, although a lot of the time you don't really have a choice. But in this case I did, because I just imagined myself in a minecart in Spawn, and I'm just kind of going upwards, you know, with, you know, redstone rails sending me upwards as quickly as I can. And so I just pretend like I'm on a roller coaster, and I just kind of like have this like childlike wonder of like, whee! And yeah, like literally in the dream, I had the voice of a child, and I'm just kind of whee! And yeah, so as that happened, I kind of am lifted into this golden light, and just, I don't know, I only saw it for like a few seconds. I don't remember what my thoughts were or anything. Maybe I didn't have any thoughts. I've heard that's what happens, I guess. I don't know. But that was kind of me laying down with my eyes closed. That's what I thought I was. But my partner lying next to me, she saw me, and her experience was very different, because to me I wasn't laying quietly, sort of like in the clouds of my head. I was just sort of like convulsing on the bed, like and making this noise, like and obviously it scared the living daylights out of her, because she had no idea what I was doing, because I don't tell her when I'm tinkering, because nothing has really happened from it, but this time it did. And so it scared her, and she just kind of like jolted me out of it. She kind of shook me awake, and that was it. And after that, I don't know. I stopped caring about things as much, or I guess maybe it was sort of the tipping point of being able to let go. I still care about things, but it's easier to let go of the things that I don't need to care about, or things that are hurting me because I care about them. And sort of after that, I was more easily able to accept just what I want to do with myself. During my Curious Markings project, sort of like a overarching theme was how blunt of an instrument words are to aligning anything that I know as truth. It's really hard to use words to align to what I know as truth. So when I know that I cannot align my words to the truth I know, I guess I just sort of realized I can at the very least align my actions to the truth that I know. And the truth that I knew through action was to start making these videos a lot more, and to work on Enderbook more, and to see if I can turn Enderbook into something that will pay my bills. Certainly I'm not there yet, and I don't know if I ever will be, but I've just sort of let go of the fear of what will happen if these things don't work out. And it's been nice. I can finally just be me as I truly am, or at least as close as I can be as I work toward letting go of as much as I can in terms of things that have been harming me, both physically and mentally. And so yeah, after that I continued to do the odd experimentation, and it's funny, I actually met someone else on Constantiam, and he's we eventually got talking about art, and I looked at some of his art, he looked at some of mine, and I got the sense that there was some sort of divinity attached to his art, and I made a comment suggesting as much, and it turns out he was a bit on the religious side, and in I think Hindu. I think he's Hindu. But anyway, after that, I continued my experimentation, and one of my experiments was just kind of this, just sort of, almost want to say like movement of energy, up above my head, into my body, through my spine, and out of my sort of rear end, into the ground, and then eventually at some point it stopped going down, and it like came back up and into me, and then it eventually stopped, and it was quite curious to me, because I didn't seem to be controlling it, but I was feeling it just the same, and what I was feeling was happening, but I didn't have it felt like I was like letting it in, but it felt like it was something beyond me in terms of like what was actually happening. And just for kicks, I was talking about this to this guy, and he actually said in like the Hindu writings or practices, what I did in that moment was the white light healing exercise, and I thought that was kind of like, oh, okay, well, that's just, confirmation bias that 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 anyone can experience something like this, and tinker and explore and find these things that people in the past have found. And you don't have to tie Hinduism or any religion to it. It's just a universal human experience. And so that sort of like opened me up to just being more accepting of what that is, and talking about it more. And anyway, while this was all happening, I was still thinking about that dream and those walls, and I was getting closer and closer to doing this video, and I had a dream one night where I was helping my partner call the college. She was having troubles talking to the instructor. This is just in the dream, by the way. She doesn't have troubles talking to her instructors. But anyway, I dialed the phone, and then I punched in the extension, and everything was perfectly clear. I knew who I was calling, the name I was asking for, and I still even remember right now the 4-digit extension that I needed to dial. And the person answered, and I asked for the instructor, and she sounded quite distraught. And she said, no, this is someone else, and I knew you were going to call, and on April 13th you were going to kill yourself. And I woke up, and I was like, wow, that's fucking stupid. My dreams gaslighting me, because I'm schizophrenic, and that suicide ideation is a common symptom. And like, I'm not gonna kill myself. Like, I'm managing things really well. Like, I don't. So I was like, okay, well, physically killing myself, that's pretty much impossible. So I thought, okay, well, maybe this is metaphorical. Is it like ego death or something? And I'm like, no, I don't think that's that either, because, like, you know, where I'm at in the stage of, like, my spiritual tinkering, I don't think I'm anywhere close to that, nor do I want it. And I think most people who have that happen, I think they probably want it in some way, and that wasn't me. And so I was just like, I don't know. But, well, at some point on April 13th, I sort of realized that, like, every time I'm, like, afraid, especially since going to college and getting professional skills, every time I'm afraid, my reaction is to work really friggin' hard. And in the past, you know, that's what I did, and I output a lot. But, you know, after 5 years of doing that and not really having any better financial position, I just hate it, and it exhausts me now to push harder. But I still get that feeling. I still try to push harder, and so lately I've just been doing the opposite. I've been training myself to, when I feel like I need to push harder, I've been training myself to slow down. And so that was one of those days where today, or April 13th, I slowed down and I did some stretches and you know, actually meditated for once. Not even on purpose. It was just, there was this beautiful moment where I looked up to the sky and the clouds were breaking and the sun was just kind of like behind it, but you could still see it. And it's just like this perfect circle of light. And I wanted to look at it forever, but obviously I can't because you know, I'll blind myself. But you know what, I just decided to, you know what, like I thought, like I want the light to hit me in the same moment that I saw that circle. And I know that light from the sun travels to the earth about 8 minutes. So I counted to 8 minutes, still stretching a little bit, but mostly just standing in place with my face to the sun, eyes closed, of course, and just taking in that moment of light, that I had that sort of like moment of beauty happen to me. And yeah, inadvertently it ended up being meditation, just because of how long it was and how blank my mind was, because I was just counting. And when I was done, I opened my eyes and I could just see and hear and perceive everything better. The whole time I was doing my stretches before then, I couldn't even hear me walking on the grass. And as soon as I came out of that meditative whatever, I could hear just like the grass underneath my feet as I took steps. And I saw this tree next to me, and it had rained the night before, and there's just droplets all over the pine needles, and the pine needles, or the droplets shining in the sun, it literally looked like a Christmas tree covered in tinsel. It's just quite amazing. And so a little bit after that, I went back home and started contemplating that, and I realized maybe I did kill a part of myself on April 13th. And I think what I might have killed was my rage. That bear that I was talking about earlier, that I've always struggled to harness. I think the moment that without any sort of struggle, the moment that I did the opposite of speeding up and working harder, which is to just leave the house and stretch and meditate. I think the moment I was able to do that without any sort of hesitancy or resistance, I think that was the moment that maybe I just let the chains off the bear. And it turned out me just trying to control it was what was causing it to be so aggressive and to be inclined to do so much damage. And so I think April 13th marks the day that I am free from my rage. And so I've celebrated by creating these walls. And the interesting thing was, on the day that I woke up from that dream about someone telling me I'm going to kill myself, I woke up to a text from another Constantiam player, a whoa. And most of the time I have no idea what he's saying. I have a really hard time understanding his English. No offense to him, but that morning he said something that I did understand, and he said, "The walls are Ganesh." And I was like, I found that quite interesting because he, you know, previous to that message, he had sent a bunch of GIFs that were super multicolored, and yeah, so I just kind of like took multicolored plus walls, and Ganesh, which is sort of like Divinity. I instantly thought of that dream in late December last year where I was at Constantiam spawn and got lifted into the divine light. And so instantly I was intrigued, and I asked him to explain more, and he sent a picture of a side-by-side of 2B2T spawn with like an Indian or Hindu mandala. I don't know if it's called a mandala, I'm probably getting it wrong, but anyway, it's just kind of like this mandala of like squares and circles, and it's supposed to represent Ganesh, and yeah, next to it was a map render of 2B2T spawn, and it looked pretty much identical, and Constantiam spawn is quite similar visually. It's very similar to 2B2T spawn. It's also very similar to the mandala representing Ganesh. And I don't know. At what point does confirmation bias no longer become confirmation bias and starts to become evidence? So, well, that's not for me to know or decide. When it comes to you, that's for you to decide for yourself, and for you to explore and tinker for yourself, and you know, I have no interest in converting anyone. I'm just sharing my story and sharing the benefits that I've gotten from just having an open mind and deciding for myself. And I think for anyone, that's all you can do. And if you find that it's not for you, then, well, that's great. I'm sure you probably don't need it, because your life is already good enough. Before I go, I just wanted to say a quick thank you to Arielle, Maren with Vintage and Morelli for letting me use their music through the Monstercat Gold program. The majority, actually all of this album, minus one song, was used in this video, and I would even say that part of this journey that I described in my video had this music heavily tied in throughout the last few months. So yeah, thank you to you too for that as well. Yeah, and just thank you everyone who is subscribed and is heavily engaged. I have a friend who is a professional YouTuber, and you know, views compared to how many people are commenting and liking, he is blown away by how engaged you guys are, and it means a lot to me, and it really keeps me going. So thank you all for continuing to watch, continuing to give feedback, and even constructive feedback is appreciated too. So yeah, thanks. Take care, everyone. Bye.